Well. Welcome back to Recharge with Bret. My name is Bret Batchelor, Training Coordinator here at NCT 911. And today we're going to be talking with the Healthy Dispatcher. All right, so today joining me, we've got the Healthy Dispatcher, none other than Adam Timm himself. Adam, thank you for joining me today, sir.
Happy to be here. Thank you so much. And I just have to clarify one thing. I am not the Healthy Dispatcher. My company's the Healthy Dispatcher, but that often happens as I'm running around in conference land. People are like, "Oh, it's the Healthy Dispatcher." My company is that. But thanks for having me here. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, of course. That is a good clarification. I was not aware of that. So, for those that are not aware, can you kind of tell us, about the Healthy Dispatcher and kind of what you're all about?
Sure. Yeah. So I was, before doing training and consulting for the industry, I was a dispatcher for the LAPD, for communications division at the LAPD, one of 700 or so line level 911 telecommunicators working for the PD. And I grappled with the challenges of the job. I was super burnt out and angry and frustrated and a bitter, jaded person for most of my 10-year career as a frontline telecommunicator. For the first 7 years, I was that way. And I didn't know that it had something to do with the way I was internalizing the stress of the job and my perceptions of the community that we served. And it wasn't until I took a mindfulness-based stress reduction program at the 7-year mark, because I was about to lose my job. I was about to get fired. I realized that I had a lot more power and control over the way things were turning out for me. And for 3 more years after transforming into a very different person, I worked at the dispatch center and found the power of taking control over the things that we have control over. And I started doing training classes and presentations while working for the LAPD, and that became what later I called the Healthy Dispatcher. And so since leaving the LAPD, it's been my mission to provide tools and perspectives to those who work in the profession so that they can also thrive, and instead of getting burnt up and spit out at the end of a career.
No, I think that's great. I think that's I think anybody that's been in this field has experienced that. We kind of we get in, we get trained, and then you're kind of thrown to the wolves and you're kind of just told to kind of figure it out. So I think while we may articulate it differently, we both have the same mind idea, very passionate about mental health, wellness. And like you said, I think in everything, you can't always control everything, but even more so in 911, you have to understand the things you can control and you can't control. So as we're talking about this, some of the things you can control, obviously we got the calls, all that happens, but you can be part of that positive culture and positive environment in that center. Can we, let's talk about a little bit about that, how we establish that positive culture.
Sure. Yeah. So I think that there's a lot of talk right now, and it's warranted and welcome, around the effects of organizational culture. And people might not know that a reflection of your organization's culture, your communication center's culture, is going to be the level of morale. If you feel like morale is low or negative or toxic in the communication center, that's a reflection of a variety of different variables which comprise the center culture. And while we all are part of creating culture, there are elements that we can leverage that will make a bigger impact, that are more influential on the organization's culture. For example, if people treat each other with kindness and empathy and compassion and cut each other slack each and every day, you're going to have a much more inclusive culture. You're going to feel like more like coming into work than not coming into work. And I think that that's the easiest way to deduce your center's culture, is whether or not you feel like coming into work each day. And if you don't feel like coming into work, it has something to do with the way you perceive aspects of your organization's culture. Yeah, I'd be curious from your perspective, because we've both been in different roles in the industry since leaving the front line, since leaving the role under the headset. What would you say are some of the aspects or some of the ways that we might be able to influence a center's culture? I mean, you have in North Central Texas, you have 20 some PSAPs. And so you get a sample of a variety of different ways of working within the walls of those various PSAPs and 911 centers. So you must see a lot. You must see many different variations. What do you think are some of the most influential factors?
You know, it's I think it's different, but it's the same. You know, we've got 40 ECCs, we've got 40
Oh my
call
gosh.
centers. And I think, like you said about that culture, you know, we kind of get in there and the job is tough, and we really have this kind of dog eat dog mentality. And, you know, when you first come in, you're not really opened with open arms, like, oh my goodness, we're so happy to have you passionate about the culture. It's, oh, well, this person's not going to meet my standard until they do these things. Then I will accept them as part of my family. And it's tough because we're very standoffish. People really don't understand what a first responder does. But I think being able to foster that in our new employees that come in, because people that have been doing it, you know, who trained me had been doing it 25 years, the amount of experience and the things that she experienced, totally different than my career. So I think, like you said, when you go to work, do you want to do the work? Are you happy to go to work? Because during the time you do it, it may be tough, the culture may be bad, but you really love the job. And then you're coming to do the job kind of in spite of that culture because you're so passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
And that's kind of crazy. I think if you can, like you said, cut each other slack. If you're having a bad day, don't put all that on anybody else. And conversely, you know, citizens are going to receive better service. First responders are going to, I mean, everything's going to, you know, positively influence. But yeah, you know, we just kind of get worried about checking a box. Are you going to be here? Are you not going to be here? As opposed to building up that employee for a person in the center and then outside of that center.
Yeah. You know, and I think that a lot of organizational culture, the negative aspects of organizational culture come because we are modeling what we were shown. And so there's this lineage of behavior that has been largely unchecked for generations. And I say generations like from a work generation perspective. And if it takes 1 to 3 years for the new crop of trainees to come in, get qualified, and realize that they don't want to work at your center, that's one work generation. So for those who have been in the profession 25, 30 years, they've seen many generations come through the walls. And if at any point in their career, their 25-year career at the center, they haven't considered their impact on whether or not people stay or go, there's a great opportunity there. Now, I don't think that we should let those who are in formal leadership roles off the hook for modeling away. I think that individually, yes, we can all police our attitudes. Individually, we can police the version of ourselves that we bring into the center. And we can be more like the leaders we want to see, no matter where we are in the organization. But I think that there is also an expectation, rightly, that those informal leadership roles, so the supervisors, CTOs, leads, tactical dispatchers, whoever has a title that's a formal leadership role, that they are necessarily being seen as the exemplars for the way we do things around here. And if they aren't modeling an exemplary way, then that's information as well. So I think that we're all part of creating a type of workplace that we want to be a part of. And it's not easy. It isn't easy. We are jacked into a hard line of victimization, negativity, tough things happening each and every day. And for me, it was the 70% of calls that are non-emergency that really got under my skin. I felt like 911 calls were my opportunity to do what I signed up to do, which was to help people make a difference. In fact, I found that people who are actually experiencing a real emergency, meaning like they got shot at, they were quite lucid, and I could quickly get the information that I needed from them, suspect information, who, what, where, when, last known direction of travel, and I could get off the call, dispatch that call to the responding units. It was the non-emergency callers who believe they have an emergency that I've called in sick many times, knowing that tomorrow I had to work the non-emergency complaint line because I was not sick, but certainly sick of dealing with these types of calls. Like I had to grapple with that because that attitude was also manifesting in my interactions with my coworkers and my supervisors and everything else.
No, and I agree. And it kind of maybe somebody maybe not in the field. It's like, man, you want emergency calls? Sure. Firefighters want to go put out fires. Like 911 call takers want to take 911 calls. That's what we're passionate about helping. And, it happens. You get kind of beat down. I think that, kind of that informal leadership, the different types of leadership, I think that comes back to that really, whether you're in that leadership title, you have to take leadership and be proactive in those areas. If I'm your supervisor and I see like, man, he's always calling in on these times, let's talk about this. Let's communicate. Let's just not make that as the status quo. And I think, those people that have been there so long kind of can get jaded and become toxic. And then it's like, well, that's just that person. We're just going to accept this poor behavior and this poor culture that we're creating.
Yeah.
And then the new people come in and the new generations come in and just feed on that same mentality.
Yeah. And I realized that I didn't really answer your first question, is what are some of the things that we can do to establish a positive work culture? And I don't know if I would even say positive, because in our industry, public safety in general, positivity is frequently poo-pooed as, there's this toxic positivity thing going on social media, where people only portray the image of their life that is effervescent and sunshine and rainbows. Right. And us bitter, jaded people who are subjected to the slings and arrows of everyone's life, because that's part of the job, working in a service role for the community, we say, oh, of course, anyone who's positive clearly has rose-colored glasses on and they don't see what's really going on. And so I prefer to say that we're establishing an effective work culture. What does effectiveness look like? And I think that we could all agree that it's more effective to feel like a part of a team. It's more effective to feel like your efforts are being seen and recognized. It's more effective to treat each other with mutual respect. It's more effective. And here's what, this is the biggest area I find, and you actually alluded to it just a moment ago. I find where there's a great opportunity to establish the type of culture that we want to be a part of is holding each other accountable. A culture of mutual accountability opens up a whole bunch of different possibilities. And so often we tolerate bad behavior. So I'm a supervisor. I've worked at the center for 10 years. No one told me how to hold people accountable. And in fact, my supervisor is one of the worst behaviors, worst models of bad behavior. And how am I? It's the plight of the middle manager, the plight of the middle supervisor. I'm working with the floor. My direct reports are looking at me. I'm trying to model a great way, but above me is somebody who isn't necessarily taking seriously the example that they set. And so all of that sends a message. And I think that even in the very best centers in this country, they are constantly policing themselves and each other, saying, hey, and it's not like a punitive, discipline-oriented, right, you better watch your P's and Q's, because that doesn't work either. That sends a different message. But it's establishing a standard of, here's how we do things, right? Would you agree that this is a better way of operating so that we can create the types of feelings that we want to be a part of. And people go, yeah, actually, that sounds really good. And so that then becomes the standard. So the best question for anyone who's tuning in is, what is the standard that you choose to set? And how are you doing living up to your own standard? Because I don't know any type A overachiever, which is the vast majority of people who work in this profession, who don't take pride in their work, who don't want to help people, who don't want to make a difference. And if given the opportunity to set that as their personal standard, wouldn't take that as an opportunity.
But I think what you talked about is the thing. It's the accountability. And like you said, it's not punitive. It's not like, I see what you're doing. You're doing it wrong. It's having that open culture to be like, hey, you know what? This is not how we do it. Having that dialogue to say, hey, Adam, here's what's going on. I'm dealing with this or whatever. And it's not a negative environment, but that thin gold line, that family environment, and let's lift everybody up and not tear everybody down, which is kind of that mentality on the phone. And I think that all just kind of comes to things that I'm passionate about. I know you're passionate about. It's just that mental health and wellness, promoting mental health and wellness. It's not just the job. You're not just answering the phone. It's also the effect of the job when you leave between the phone calls, taking that terrible call, not being able to process it, hang up, and then you got another terrible call on the line. And that person deserves your 100%, You don't think about, you go to the doctor, you're going to have a surgery done. That doctor has a really bad patient right before you. You don't want to have that doctor maybe again. Like, what are they dealing with? In a lot of other professions, you have that time to kind of come down and decompress. But in 911, it's boom, 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 boom. So we're not able to really mentally process it. So, how can we kind of promote that mental health and wellness in this profession? How can we, uplift that? Obviously we got to get buy-in from top down. I think that's most important. But
so I think establishing a culture of mental health and wellness is important. So having resources available for people to access should they need it, the EAP, critical incident stress debriefings or CISM, having conversations around these things, being aware of when someone in the room is on a tough call or when there is one of these critical incidents that occurs, that people likely would enjoy an outlet. Having a peer support program. I think that you have to have these variables in place in the event that people need them. And that sends a huge message. I think the next step, if your agency has these things in place, is pointing them out and talking about them in the training program after people get qualified, creating a culture of acceptance that it's okay to access these programs, because I know many agencies that have these programs in place and some people don't even know they exist. And so when they feel like they would do well to talk to somebody, they kind of flounder and they just turn to the person next to them and complain about the way things are. And I think that oftentimes we mask our pain by complaining about things and saying eventually, I hate people are so stupid. And that's just the way things are. So I think that those are kind of the leading indicators of a culture of wellness. I think that we also have to be willing to ask for help. As heroic caregivers to the world, we frequently put others' needs ahead of our own. And we need to fight that stigma, the stigma that it's not okay if we ask for help, the stigma that if I do ask for help, it says that I'm weak and that I can't hack it. And just saying this collectively, it's okay to not be okay. And I'm seeing that message much more than 10 years ago when I first started doing this. And I think that is an indicator of how the stigma is finally waning. Unfortunately, we still have people suffering in silence. And I've known several who unfortunately have taken their life, not knowing where else they could turn. So I think it's multifaceted. We need these programs, these resources, by the agency, by the county, by whoever the 911 center is organized under. And then our formal leaders need to talk about it in our weekly touch points. We need to talk about it. If we see a deviation in behavior, so a normally great employee, you've seen over the last few weeks, comes in, their head is kind of low, they're low energy. It's showing up in their interactions, both with callers, coworkers, on the radio. That should be an indicator that there's an opportunity for a compassionate inquiry into something that they might have going on. For me personally, this is the final piece of all this. I needed to understand how stress was impacting me and how it was creating anger and irritability in me, and how my burnout, which burnout is a psychological manifestation of the body's physiological experience of being too stressed for too long. And so it affects the body. So I had tension headaches and migraines and an ulcer. These were the physiological symptoms of being burnt out. But psychologically, I looked out into the world and everything just got under my skin. Mm-hmm. Like there's clear indicators that your stress level is just below the red line. And you might say, well, everyone else is this way. What's the big idea? There may be no big problem with it. But what happens is if we're operating just below our red line, meaning the red line is a point where we break down and we get overwhelmed. And it's frequently after years of operating just beneath the red line that we take a call that we've taken 100 times in our career, but we hear something or there's some variable that's different about this time. It pushes us over the red line and we experience vicarious trauma. Or we're past the boundaries of compassion fatigue and we can't engage our lives both on or off the job in the way that we want to. And then we go home to our families and we're burnt up and we're spent and we just say, hey, leave me alone. And then we don't talk to the people that mean the most to us. And so we have to have the courage to personally seek help, reach outside of ourselves. But organizationally, we have to have the courage to go to bat for our people, to make sure that there are these resources in place.
Yeah, I think it's so important. Like you said, the resources in place too, but I think even on that, you almost have to, it has to be everywhere. Everywhere they turn, they have to see resources. They have to see it. They shouldn't have to go and look through the book to try to find help. The help should be right there, everywhere.
It's too late.
Yeah.
If I take a call that has deeply affected me, and I go look one place and I can't find it, I go back to my console and I put my head down and I just go back to the next call. That's a huge missed opportunity.
Right. And I think too, it's about relationships. You have to build a relationship with your people and your peers. Why are we kind of taking it on our family? We feel safe. We feel safe to give it our real person. And I think if you're working with the same people all the time, in the call center, sometimes you see them more than your family. That is your work family. We have to be aware of ourselves. I got to be okay so I can see that you're not okay, or vice versa, and have those resources there. You get onboarded, you get that training. They say, call this number if you need help. And then that's the last you see it, and it is that comparison, like, oh, well, it affected me, but it didn't affect them. So maybe I'm not for the job. No, you can't compare each other. Everybody's different. Everybody affects things differently. I'm 6'5" and I'm tall. My wife is 5'3". There's no better or worse. I'm just really tall and she's really short. So I can get things on the top shelf and she can't, but that doesn't make her less. It's just about how you process things and work through it. And, I think that you said top down too. I think a lot of things, everything comes down to money, right? Why are we going to do health and wellness? Why are we going to do these things? Why are we going to invest? Let that person off if they need a mental health day or they're overwhelmed, or bring in those programs for mindfulness and things, because do you always want to be hiring? Do you want lawsuits? Do you want these things to happen? Do you want all this overtime? Do you want this sick time? I mean, just from a dollar standpoint, it makes sense to have happy people. You want to have
Yeah.
people that love to do the job and have the resources. But like you said, I think it's so important in the last 5 or 10 years. It's okay not to be okay. This movement that's happening, and I just hope it can continue, and we can continue to uplift our people in the public safety and thin gold light family. So
Same.
I appreciate the chat with you, Adam. Like we talked about, establish that positive culture, be proactive, take ownership. That's what everybody wants. You want to take ownership, take care of yourself so you can take care of each other. This job is so important, the best job you'll ever have, but we got to be there and ready for our people. And then when we go home, we got to be okay. So again, Adam, thank you for joining me. Remember, check out the Healthy Dispatcher. A lot of good resources there. And until next time, stay charged.